So we've gone from these exploited, undocumented ranch workers hiding their faces telling their stories because of fear of retaliation from ranchers to them happily showing their faces in a pity me article because now the National Park Service should be responsible for housing them somehow. And somehow the ranchers themselves, the bad guys in all of this, who are about to be given another $40 million to leave, are being left out of it. How are these people escaping the responsibility of helping out the very employees that they have abused? How exactly does it not occur to Andrew Giacomini that he should be suing the ranchers to provide housing for people that they have abused for decades, instead of somehow making it the taxpayers and the National Park Service's responsibility to house these people? But in any case, he's throwing a wrench in something that is nearly to finally have some significant progress. And he's pulling this crap now. But something else I want to point out is how many inaccuracies were printed once again without any consequences, this time by the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. I find myself in a rather strange place. I am tempted to get very angry and very mean in criticizing the farm workers who are part of the Giacomini lawsuit. And why is this strange? Because it was only a few years ago that I went out of my way to try and help these people tell the story of the hardships that they experience living on these ranches under these ranchers. Where were the people who were concerned for these farm workers all these decades that the ranchers were taking advantage of the taxpayer, abusing the land, and abusing these workers? Now, all of a sudden, when it comes time to throw a wrench in progress being made to help restore the seashore, all of a sudden, there's concern for these people. And the straw really breaking my back is these farm workers being willing participants in it and playing the pity card. It makes you accomplices of the very people that abused you. Maybe it's a consequence, maybe it's a symptom of being in the presence of these whiny, complaining ranchers during their lives that they now think that they also get to play the pity card, as if they deserve more consideration than anyone else. I see another article in the Press Democrat showing the struggles of teachers. You know what? Maybe Point Reyes National Seashore should provide housing for teachers. As a former teacher who can't afford to be a teacher in California, I'd be down for that. Anyone want to feel sorry for me? All right, too much backstory. I think you'll understand better when I read from this latest article. This is a quote from one of the farm workers, Margarito Loza. "It's a mess," he said, "but I would like those who are donating the money to realize who they are harming. The people who work for wages below the minimum wage." So again, this is the overall theme to me is, hey, don't make progress because it might negatively impact a small, little tiny factor here. But you could argue all day and night that if in fact you are that sympathetic toward people in need, that, yeah, okay, that's a worthy cause, that's a worthy concern. Who else do you apply that to? These people are working for below the minimum wage. I thought that was illegal in California. It gets a little blurry because it's kind of like a state thing in California where it's illegal, but it's also federal land, which makes it pretty weird. You shouldn't be there at all. You shouldn't be there at all. That is the public's land. You certainly don't deserve to get to keep living there. But Why don't we talk about the people that are paying you below minimum wage? The people that received the equivalent of, what was it, $300 million to leave 50 years ago and are now being paid another $40 million in the next attempt for them to leave. Let's hope that they actually leave this time. These are the people that are paying you less than minimum wage, but the donors trying to save the national park are the bad guys? These multi-millionaires won't pay you guys minimum wage, but the donors trying to save wildlife, trying to save the national seashore, trying to save the water, trying to save the flora and the fauna, and actually get these corrupt, disgusting ranchers out of there are the bad guys? We're going to throw away the possibility of the progress of this finally actually being the national seashore that it was supposed to have been decades ago because of a sudden concern for a handful of farm workers? Stop pretending, humans. Stop pretending that you are these ethical, compassionate people. Where have you been? Where have you been all this time? Where were you coming to the aid of these people? We can all play the pity card. Let me play the pity card. Hey, I've been sleeping in my van. I went out trying to do things to raise awareness for what's happening in Point Reyes National Seashore. When I went out to conduct interviews to try and raise awareness of the conditions that these farm workers were being forced to live in, I had to sleep in my van because I can't afford hotels. I can't afford permanent housing in California. And guess what? The guy whining in this article grew up in Mexico and found a way to be employed here in the United States. I'm going to go ahead and say illegally, undocumented. My goal isn't to get this person in trouble, but isn't it funny that when years ago, how these people were being treated was a secret, they didn't want to go on camera for fear of the retaliation that would happen from the ranchers. Now we have these people posing for photos for this article that's trying to raise pity for them, and no one's looking at the people that abused them all this time who are about to get $40 million. Make the ranchers buy them housing outside of the seashore. Like the idea that the only option is for them to continue to live inside of a national park. Like I said, I didn't grow up in Mexico. This isn't my strongest point because I don't give a shit where people grew up. But we are going to allow people to live in Point Reyes National Seashore because of all of a sudden pity for the very undocumented workers that the newly elected president got into office because of his declaration that he's going to get rid of all of these people. But that's who we're going to stop the progress of restoring Point Reyes National Seashore for. You can't have it both ways. Which one are you? You're all about human rights and quality of life? Or are you about, let's make America great again by getting rid of all of these foreigners? I have been working since I was 10 years old as a United States citizen. My big reward, not being able to afford housing, still having to pay off student loan debt, grad school, teaching credential debt, a country that I can't afford a house as a teacher, as a highly educated person. But we're suddenly going to feel pity for farm workers who want to keep living in Point Reyes National Seashore. Tell me why these multimillionaires who've been abusing them all this time shouldn't hold the responsibility of finding housing for these people, if in fact you truly have a concern for their well-being. Why in the hell are the people who are trying to make a seashore the bad guys here, and not the people that have been abusing these farm workers all this time? Get me some housing while you're at it. And as a matter of fact, I'd like to live in Point Reyes National Seashore. What exactly is the precedent? That you had to work in Point Reyes or that you're poor? because they made a point of letting us know how poor these people are. And no one mentioned their employers who helped keep them poor. No, those guys are getting off scot-free. But what about homeless people? I mean, they're really poor. Maybe they should get housing in Point Reyes. Are we going to spread the pity all the way to them? Let's move to that scumbag Giacomini. I'll stop focusing on the farm workers for a minute, because the real bad guy here is Giacomini, who has deep roots. The Giacomini dairy empire, the damage to the land and water and wildlife that these people have caused, the damage that they've done to the taxpayers is immeasurable. And he does this work where he pretends like he cares about people. Where have you been all this time, Giacomini? Where have you been all this time? Where have you been representing the people being abused by the ranchers out there? Where have you been? This is going to benefit the Giacominis. Mark my words. He's doing this pro bono, and he wants to keep that land in the ranch family's hands. All they have to do is give me housing, says Giacomini. He's the one who is slowing this down. He's the one who's going to make this not take place before Satan gets back into office and stops any progress that might have been made. Giacomini, you are going to be responsible for that. You're the one standing in the way of progress. You are the bad guy. Everybody will be happy. All they have to do is agree to give me housing and everybody's fine. Nope, wrong. There's no way it'll end there. I mean, it sets an absurd precedent. Now I'm going to quote someone named Lieb Patterson. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, and I don't really care. This was a Bay Area philanthropist and past Nature Conservancy donor. And this person is quoted as saying, "My concern was it doesn't take care of the problems. It just removes the ranchers from the seashore," she said. "It doesn't clean up the waterways. It doesn't manage the grasslands to keep them from becoming a fire hazard. It was just to buy out the leases." Well, this shows how little you know about nature. Removing the ranchers does clean up the waterways. Who do you think is mucking up the waterways? You just have to remove the problem for nature to have a chance to begin the healing process. That's one of the dumbest quotes I've read. Well, I don't know. This article is full of them. Wow. It doesn't clean up the waterways? Yes, it does. It may take a little bit of time, but that's a lot different from continuing to pollute the waterways. What is this person thinking? It doesn't manage the grasslands. What grasslands? You freaking idiot. Do you know what you're talking about? Finally, we have an opportunity for it to stop being the invasive annual fire fuel that you call grasslands. None of that shit is supposed to be there. Those are all symptoms of the ranchers. And we're getting rid of them. Finally, Point Reyes National Seashore can start to heal. And you're saying, oh, but ending the ranching leases isn't going to solve the problem. Yes, it is. They are the problem. They stand in the way of progress. They stand in the way of turning that into something that will become naturally fire resistant. And again, these grasslands that you're talking about, are you kidding me? The trampled, degraded, manure-covered pastoral zone that has some grass growing? You gotta be kidding me. You know who can manage? You know who can manage the grasslands? The tule elk and all the other wildlife that I pray to God will be introduced to Point Reyes National Seashore when the people that hate wildlife are finally gone. Back to the farm workers. The large settlement sums said to be involved are beyond comprehension for farm worker Margarito Loza, who grew up in Mexico and has been working at the Seashore Spaghetti Dairy since 1991. Guess what? Guess what, buddy? You didn't have to grow up in Mexico or be exploited by the disgusting Spaghetti family, and they're in the top list. Those are some bad people. This is beyond comprehension for most of us. You act like you're the only poor people out there. You act like you're the only non-millionaires out there. I'd like a cut. We're giving millionaires more millions. Yeah, you should be upset about that. The same way the rest of us should be upset about the fact that they've continued to live there after being given those millions. And the fact that you got exploited by those people since 1991 is not an argument for why you should get to stay. You, actually, I could argue, are part of the problem. You chose to make your living supporting and making richer bad people. So screw you. I'm so sick of the pity. I'm so sick of the pity parties. Are you kidding me? Let's move on to the next pity party person that I want to make fun of. Quote, local advocate Jasmine Bravo, who grew up a farm worker's daughter on West Marin Farms, living most recently at the Seashore's former McClure Dairy, has sought to change that. Okay, we can stop right here. Why are you living at the former McClure Dairy? You know why? Because McClure is allowed, as a historic rancher, to rent out the properties of the housing on the massive land. The massive amount of land he has out there at a joke of a lease price. And now exploit the Seashore in yet another way by renting these places out. Bravo. Did you bother looking into the people that had to leave when McClure pretended that he was in dire straits and had to shut things down, which he has not shut things down. He simply changed his operations. Why don't you look into that piece of trash, Bob McClure? I mean, shouldn't be hard. You're still supporting him. You're still supporting a millionaire by renting from him. She's teamed up in recent months with several other local advocates to hold regular meetings with farm workers and their families to keep them informed of the latest news in the case. And there is a photo of this person also. There are just a lot of families right now and a lot of uncertainty, Bravo said, and I'm just trying to make our residents' voices stronger by bringing them together. Okay, it sounds like you're trying to help undo the progress of restoring Point Reyes National Seashore. And I don't know if this person's officially being included in the poor category, but she doesn't look like she's starving. And I would say that the budget you spend on those ridiculous fake eyelashes and the rest of your makeup could be spent on food and maybe housing somewhere else. I'm not buying it. I'm so sick of the pity parties. I'm just not going to be nice to any of these people. You posed for the photos. You posed for the photos, as did Loza and this woman, Akala. Oh, look at these poor people. Look at Loza with the faraway stare. I don't know what's going to become of me. We've got another quote from Loza. The environmental group that sued the park is asking for help paying the ranchers, but they are not taking into account the workers who work in the park. You're not supposed to be there. You're not supposed to be there. Can I make that more clear? You aren't supposed to be there any more than those ranchers are. When your employers are removed, you should obviously go with them, since neither of you should be there at all. Is it really that much of a stretch of the imagination to think that instead of being mad at the Nature Conservancy and the donors, maybe you should be mad at the multi-millionaires that aren't considering you? Why on earth would you not look to the people who have a ton of money to carry the burden of helping you out? You're obviously being used. You're obviously being puppets. I don't know if these people were tricked, if they just didn't bother to look into it deeply, or if this is truly how they think. And if it is, shame on you. Hold the ranchers accountable. Don't pretend like people who have been fighting for this seashore ever since the ranchers started illegally squatting there did some sudden move in the dark. This should not be a surprise. Maybe you've been hearing the lies of the ranchers while working on the ranch lands for too long. They're not supposed to be there. It was always the intention for them to be removed, regardless of the lies that the ranchers spread, and I'm sure have told their workers, if in fact you even encounter these people. You know, they have empires and multiple businesses, so God knows if the ranch owners are ever actually out there, or if it's simply the exploited workers. And by the way, good for you. Good for you people being part of the problem. Good for you helping steal babies from mothers. Good for you helping pollute the land. Oh, these people are heroes. Let's have pity for them. I'm a fucking unemployed teacher, and you steal babies from mothers. So fuck you. Go find your own housing. Finally, I will turn my wrath upon the Santa Rosa Press Democrat for printing this garbage. Oh, it's a tale of human sadness and hardship. That'll get readers. Besides preying upon this disgusting story, how about the fact that you printed inaccuracies of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elk near the fence? And the caption says, a herd of about 40 tule elk roam on land ranched by farmer Tim Kehoe, whose dairy pasture abuts the point-raised Tule Elk Reserve and the 8-foot fence. No. I've never seen 40 elk outside the reserve, period. I barely see 40 elk inside the reserve. Let me guess. Tim Kehoe, another top-tier scumbag, told you that there were 40 Tule elk there. Did you and your photographer bother to look at how terrible Kehoe's land looks? Farmer. Tim Kehoe, a farmer. This is a great example, ladies and gentlemen, of why the word farmer is abused. In this case, rather than calling him a rancher, we're going to call him a farmer. He is a rancher. He is an animal abuser. He is an animal slaughterer. He is a killer of the land. He is a poisoner of the water. That's what he has chosen to do for a living, at the taxpayer's expense, at the planet's expense. What a great person. Look at the Tule Elk Reserve, ladies and gentlemen. Look how healthy it is. Do not start talking about the damage that the elk do when the ranch land is what looks like total trash in Point Reyes National Seashore. And stop using the word farmer in place of rancher, especially when I do it, people call me out for it. It's used conveniently. I think the word farmer gets a more sentimental reaction than even a rancher does, which is the reason that it's being used here. So shame on you, publication. They include a map of Point Reyes National Seashore and show where the elk are, the 3 different main herds. And it's for me, it's worth noting that it's kind of misleading because even that is fragmented habitat. You know, it looks as though you would think that is designated elk land. No, it's elk trying to get by in partial wilderness, but also a lot of ranch land. Like I've gone through Home Ranch. I've gone through the Spalletta Ranch. These are pretty unfriendly, wildlife unfriendly places. And this is what's being included when they talk about Drake's Beach and Limiter Beach. Finally, I'll talk about Giacomini one more time. Why Giacomini? If your intentions are so good, would you expect the Park Service to be who is responsible for providing housing for these farm workers? It just makes such little sense, especially compared to the fact that you have the ranchers right there for you to focus your energy on. Your chances of success legally seem greater if you were to bring forth a lawsuit that says that the ranchers should provide housing. I can't understand why a Point Reyes National Seashore, a national park unit, should be responsible for providing housing for employees of people who operated private businesses inside of public land. Why wouldn't you just go after the people with money and have them provide the housing? Oh, because you're part of that group. As much as you want to paint a picture of yourself as being a do-gooder, you are a part of the evil empire.